Good afternoon everyone. My name's Gillian Beasley and I'm Chief Executive of Peterborough City Council, so I'm in my home patch here, but I'm also Chief Executive of Cambridgeshire County Council, and I probably lead over 7,000 staff who at the moment probably are mostly working from home, although we've obviously got quite a few frontline staff. And I'm really pleased to be here today to talk about mental health awareness, and I feel like almost the follow-up to Gary, because we've actually employed Gary within the County Council and within Peterborough to do some work with us, and I'm going to reflect on some of the things that I think have been really important for our workforce in embracing some of the messages that Gary has given us. I wanted to start with a quote though, and I think it's an important one, and it's this. It's from Glenn Close, and it says, "What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candour and more unashamed conversation." And as we know, mental health has come into particular focus as a result of COVID-19, and we've seen some of those issues within our own workforce. But also in relation to men, we know that suicide is the leading cause of death of men up to 40. We also know, and I still think this, that talking about mental health is still often very difficult, and I'm going to reflect on some of the conversations we've had within my two councils in relation to this. But for many years as a chief exec, I have put mental health and mental health issues at the top of my agenda. And you may ask why I've done that. Well, from a public service perspective, I need people who have good mental health, who come to work highly productive, motivated, and who enjoy their work, because they work in some of the most challenging circumstances, as you probably know, with some of the issues that we address in local government. But I also, and this is the mantra that we developed, I think, in the training that we did with Gary, is that we want people to be their best selves when they come into the work environment. And also we want them to be their best selves in their personal lives, because we know how that builds good relationships and improves their mental health. I say that as a chief exec, but I also say that as an individual, because many years ago, after the birth of my daughter, I suffered from a serious bout of poor mental health, postnatal depression. I had absolutely no idea what was happening to me. I felt very lonely, I felt very isolated, and I felt like I had this heavy weight on me. I was extremely lucky because I had an excellent GP who took me by the scruff of the neck, gave me some very short-term medication, but also an employer who was open and willing to see that I needed help and gave me a month off. And with that combination, I came back stronger and healthier. And without that, I don't think actually I would have come back as I am today. And that was a defining moment. So I knew those ingredients of actually speaking about it, doing something about it, but having a good employer were absolutely vital to my improvement in mental health. Last year, before COVID, we commissioned, as I say, Gary and his company to do some work. And I announced this to my leaders and managers. We're going to do some mental health awareness training. And not surprisingly, senior leaders in my organisations were a little bit sceptical. Why do we need to do this? I'm extremely busy. How are you going to take a day out of my work life to do this? Well, in fact, the truth of it is it's the best ever training that our organisation has ever done, and it's not just Gary's here. The levels of support and feedback were tremendous, and you may ask me why that was. Well, actually, one of the reasons was that we focused on our own mental health. We actually understood the workings of the brain, and if you want to understand those, Gary is probably the best person I've ever heard. We understood how our teenage brain works, and we do in management team meetings now, when somebody reacts badly to something, we say, you're in your teenage brain, you need to think about why you've reacted in that way. So we actually understand how we behave and how our mental health is affected by what's happening in the environment around us, and we know how to look after ourselves. So you know, over the COVID-19, I've not had a day's leave since December. I've worked persistently, probably 14-15 hours a day every day, except probably for Saturdays, but I kept my mental health well and good because of the things that I've learned from Gary, and being aware of those moments when somebody says, you're a bit irritable today, and I know that my bucket is overflowing. So, and that was really important. So we took time to think about ourselves, and that really made us think about our employees, how we were behaving and how we were coming over to them. And so we started to think not just about managing them and manage them better, about the whole culture of our organisation. And so we crafted a set of values for our organisation, and we imagined what we wanted our organisation to be like in 2021. And we were very honest about where we stood at the moment and the things that we needed to do to improve. And that isn't just about how we behave, it was also about how we create a good working environment, a physical environment where people could perform their best. So our mantra now is we want our staff to be the best in the work environment. We want to support them to be their best in that environment. And we have still quite a way to go. We're not there yet. COVID has thrown up a whole range of other issues about home working, the isolation of that, about the fear that people have in coming back into the work environment because we are returning people. But understanding mental health, the spectrum of mental health, has been extremely important. The last thing I want to say is this thing about stigma, and that's what I really learned about this course, is when we talk about somebody's got a broken leg, we talk very openly and we say, oh, it's really, really difficult, and we support them. When you say somebody's got depression, there's a completely different reaction to that. It's almost like you don't talk about it, or they've got depression, or they aren't well. You don't talk about it openly, and we don't acknowledge it, and we don't allow people then to treat it as something which we can include in our conversation. We can make the work environment better for people who have a bout of poor mental health, just one bout as I did, and enable them to come back. So we learnt about that stigma, and that's why I always want to talk about my own mental health. I talk openly to my colleagues about how I'm feeling, but we also talk generally about mental health in our organisation. And as I say, we're not completely there on that journey, but we are along the way. So we also, I think just lastly I want to say, it was very easy to stop that training when COVID came. Everybody kind of disappeared at home. Working with Gary's company, we found an innovative way to continue that training. So we now have all of our staff, and they're going through training, and I think it will carry on through the autumn, doing mental health training virtually, because we've recorded sessions for them. Because I felt at this time more than ever, we just couldn't abandon it. We had to continue that journey. So I can't speak more highly of the work that we've done, but of the importance of this, and the importance that it will continue to have. We must not, as a society, take our eyes off this. We must destigmatise it. We must talk openly, shine a light, be more candid, and be more talk about it in an unashamed way. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for listening.